How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? Marcus Aurelius. Have you ever felt that burst of rage, that fire in your chest when something unexpected or upsetting happens? We've all experienced it, whether it's a moment of frustration with a colleague, a heated argument with a loved one, or a rude stranger who tests our patience. In those moments, it feels like anger is the only option. But after the storm passes, we often look back with regret, wondering why we let ourselves get so carried away. Imagine for a second how different your life would be if you could harness that moment of anger and simply pause. The Stoic philosopher Seneca believed this pause was not just important, but essential for living a good life. He famously said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Today, we're going to dive into why this simple piece of advice can radically change your relationship with anger and ultimately lead to a more peaceful and fulfilling life. Anger is a powerful emotion. It's fiery, intense, and sometimes feels uncontrollable. But the Stoics understood that anger is never a true reflection of the external world. Instead, it's a result of how we interpret the events around us. The Stoics taught that we should not be disturbed by things themselves, but by our judgments of those things. Let's unpack this a bit. Imagine you're driving on the highway and someone abruptly cuts you off. The surge of anger you feel seems justified, right? But here's the thing. It's not the action itself that angers you. It's your interpretation of it. You feel disrespected, wronged, maybe even unsafe. But what if, instead of assuming the worst, you paused for a moment and thought, maybe they're rushing to a hospital or maybe they didn't see me? This simple reframe changes everything. You're no longer a victim of the situation and your anger dissipates. This is where delay comes into play. Seneca's wisdom teaches us that delaying our reaction gives us a moment to reframe, reflect, and regain control. Anger thrives on immediate reactions. When we're angry, we want to act now. But what if, instead of lashing out, we took just a few seconds to breathe, reflect, and choose our response carefully? Let's dig deeper into why anger is such a destructive force. First and foremost, anger is blinding. It clouds our judgment and prevents us from seeing things clearly. When we're angry, our minds are fixated on one thing: revenge, retaliation, or justice. But the problem is that in this state, we're not thinking rationally. We're not thinking about the consequences of our actions. We're only thinking about how to get rid of this intense feeling in the moment. Seneca, in his essay on anger, compares anger to temporary insanity. He says, "No plague has cost the human race more. You will see murder, poisoning, litigation, cities in ruin, and entire nations destroyed." He goes on to explain that anger, more than any other emotion, pushes us to act irrationally, often leading to disastrous consequences. And he's right, isn't he? How many times have we witnessed, in our own lives or in the lives of others, the destructive power of unchecked anger? Wars have been waged, relationships torn apart, and lives ruined, all because someone couldn't control their temper. But it doesn't have to be this way. Seneca believed that anger is not something that controls us. It's something we can control. And the first step in gaining that control is, once again, delay. By simply delaying our reaction, we create a buffer between stimulus and response. It's in this buffer that we find our power, our ability to choose how we want to respond, instead of being slaves to our emotions. Now, let's be clear. Delay doesn't mean suppression. The Stoics never advocated for suppressing emotions. They knew that anger, like all emotions, is natural. But they also believed that just because an emotion arises doesn't mean we have to act on it. Anger will come, but it doesn't have to dominate us. Instead, by delaying our reaction, we allow ourselves time to process the emotion in a healthy, rational way. So, how do we practice delay in real-life situations? It's one thing to understand the concept, but another to actually apply it in the heat of the moment. Let's talk about some practical strategies you can start using today to master this Stoic principle. First and foremost, breathing. When anger strikes, one of the first physical reactions we experience is a change in our breathing. It becomes shallow, rapid, and tense. By consciously taking a deep breath, we send a signal to our brain that it's time to calm down. Breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps slow your heart rate and relax your body. This simple act can break the cycle of anger and give you the space you need to think clearly. Another powerful technique is mental reframing. When you feel anger rising, instead of reacting immediately, take a step back and ask yourself, is this situation really worth my anger? Often, when we put things in perspective, we realize that what we're angry about is either minor or temporary. For example, if someone insults you, rather than taking it personally, consider that their comment might reflect more about them than about you. Reframing helps us see situations from a broader, less emotional perspective, which can diffuse our anger. Count to 10 is a classic piece of advice that you've probably heard before, but it works. Counting gives your brain something else to focus on, which creates a brief moment of delay. This delay is all you need to gain control over your emotions. If 10 seconds isn't enough, try 20 or 30. The goal is to give yourself enough time to let the initial surge of anger pass before you decide how to respond. Another Stoic practice that works well here is visualizing the bigger picture. In the grand scheme of your life, is this moment really that significant? Will it matter in a week, a month, or a year? The Stoics often reflected on the shortness of life as a way to keep things in perspective. Life is too short to be consumed by anger over trivial matters. By reminding yourself of this, you can more easily let go of the small irritations that would otherwise trigger your anger. Another effective method is simply walking away. When you feel your anger rising, physically remove yourself from the situation if possible. This gives you time to cool down and think more clearly. Walking away doesn't mean you're avoiding the problem. It means you're taking control of the situation by ensuring you don't react in the heat of the moment. In fact, this is one of the most mature ways to handle anger because it shows that you value thoughtful responses over emotional outbursts. One thing that Seneca also emphasized was self-reflection. After the moment has passed, take some time to reflect on why you got angry in the first place. Was it truly the external event, or was it something within you? Often, our anger comes from unmet expectations, insecurities, or deeper personal issues. By reflecting on these underlying causes, we can better understand ourselves and prevent similar anger in the future. Now, some of you might be thinking, but isn't anger sometimes justified? Shouldn't I get angry when I'm treated unfairly or when someone wrongs me? And you're right, there are times when anger seems justified. But even in those moments, the Stoics would argue that acting out of anger rarely leads to a good outcome. You can still address injustice, unfairness, or wrongdoing, but from a place of calm, rational thought, rather than from a place of blind rage. Take, for example, Martin Luther King Jr., one of the most influential leaders in history. During the Civil Rights Movement, he faced unimaginable provocation and injustice. But did he react with anger and violence? He practiced nonviolent resistance, choosing to address the injustices he faced with calm, deliberate action. This approach not only made his message more powerful, but also prevented him from being consumed by the hatred and anger that surrounded him. The same principle applies to our own lives. When someone wrongs us, we have two choices. We can react with anger, which will likely lead to conflict and further harm, or we can delay our response, reflect, and choose a more constructive path forward. This doesn't mean we're passive or allow ourselves to be walked over. It means we're strategic, thoughtful, and wise in how we handle difficult situations. And here's the beautiful thing. The more you practice delay, the easier it becomes. Like any skill, mastering anger takes time and repetition. At first, it might feel difficult, even unnatural, to pause and reflect when you're angry. But over time, it becomes a habit. Eventually, you'll find that anger no longer has the same grip on you. You'll be able to face life's provocations with a calm, steady mind, confident in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Remember, Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about mastering them. And delay is one of the most effective tools in achieving that mastery. By delaying our reaction to anger, we're not only preventing regret and harm, but also cultivating a sense of inner peace and control that leads to a better, more fulfilling life. So, the next time you feel that familiar surge of anger, remember Seneca's words. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Take a breath, count to 10, walk away if you need to, and give yourself the time and space to choose your response wisely. In doing so, you'll not only avoid the pitfalls of anger, but also live a life that's aligned with the Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, and self-control. Thanks for watching.